Welcome to Computing at Home with Digital Schoolhouse. My name is Estelle, otherwise known as ComSci Geek. I'm a computing teacher and also develop resources for the programme. We specialise in delivering computing workshops that are accessible, educational and fun. You are watching part 2 of our Just Dance with the Algorithm workshop. Don't worry if you haven't watched part 1 yet, you can do part 2 as a standalone workshop and then check out part 1 after. To all the learners watching, remember you can pause the video at any time to take notes, collect your thoughts or take part in the workshop alongside me. In fact, if this is your first time following along a programming video, I really highly recommend that you do pause the video whenever you need to do any of the instructions so that you're able to keep up with me. And remember, you can always run it back as well if you're not quite sure what I did and you just want to remind yourself what it looked like. The Digital Schoolhouse team are ready and waiting in the chat should you have any questions throughout, and I'll also be taking 5 minutes to answer your questions at the end of the workshop. Parents and guardians, you might want to watch the next bit as it explains how to access Scratch, but after that feel free to join in or sit nearby to supervise if you want to. Let's get started. Okay, so the first thing I would really recommend that you do is that you go onto the internet. I'd recommend using Google Chrome for this. You don't have to, but it really does work better. Type in Scratch, click on Google search, and the link that you're looking for is the very first one, the Scratch Imagine Programs Share. And then if you click on where it says Start Creating, it might take a minute just to load the page, but don't worry, this is what it will look like once it's loaded. So I'm just going to give you just a minute to do that so that you can get the file open and ready to go. So just to remind you, in case you just want a quick reminder, all you need to do is head over to Google, type in Scratch, spelt correctly helps. The first link, Scratch Imagine Program Share, and then click on Start Creating. I'll just give you a moment to do that and then we'll carry on. Okay, hopefully you have got that ready and you're ready to start the workshop. So today we're doing part 2 of our Just Dance with the Algorithm workshop, and I hope that you really enjoy this. So we're going to be looking at how you can digitise your dance today. The challenge in this workshop will be for you to learn about how to implement a pre-written algorithm within a programming language such as Scratch. You're going to be looking at how to create a digitised dance sequence using sequence, selection and repetition. And also you're going to be looking at how to improve the effectiveness of a programme by implementing procedures. So some of those things we actually spoke about last time. So hopefully you can remember that sequence just means the instructions are in the order that you wrote them in. So they just run in the order that they were written. Selection means that there's a sort of a question being asked. Maybe it's asking, has the music started? Yes, maybe, and then they'll start the dance. And also repetition, where you are repeating parts of your dance. And the third part is the procedures, which is just where you name your dance routine. So you had a few different moves and we gave them a name so we could access them and refer to them much more easily when we started to use them in our algorithm. So we're going to be going digital today. So Just Dance is a game that's been developed on computers and played on computers. So a group of people work together to create characters and animations on the computer. They then combined these characters with music and wrote a computer program to put it all together. You can create your own program that mimics the game Just Dance, and we're going to be doing that using Scratch today. So the only thing that you're going to need is the website, and I've already shown you how to access that, but in case you missed it, the website address is just scratch.mit.edu. I'll just repeat that again, it's scratch.mit.edu. You don't need anything else for this workshop at all, just accessing the website. So our first step is going to be importing our dance move characters. So I'm going to head over to Scratch and I'm going to demonstrate how to do that for you next. Okay, so here I have Scratch, and you can see that it's got some tutorials that are already open, but we don't actually need to use those. So the first thing I'm going to do is close them. So you can close them just by clicking on the little close cross in the corner, and it's these green tutorial windows. So just close both of those just to clear the space ready for you to use. And the other thing we're going to do is we aren't going to be using the Scratch Cat for this particular piece of work. So the next thing that you need to do is just delete the Scratch Cat. So to do that, just click on the little cross with a little dustbin in the corner in here, just where the thumbnails, we call these little pictures thumbnails, the thumbnails for the sprites. So anything that we add into our game, the stage, which is this area up here where the Scratch Cat, the larger version of the Scratch Cat is, anything we add onto the stage is called a sprite. So we're going to delete the sprite because we don't need to use this particular one. So click on that to delete it. Don't forget, as I said earlier, if you aren't sure or you need to repeat a step, pause the video, run it back, watch it again, or if you want to pause it so that you can complete the step that I've just done, please do. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to start to add our dance moves in. So to do this, you go down to this little icon here in the bottom corner that has a little cat with a little plus on it, and if you hover over it, it says choose sprite, and the one that we're going to use is the one that says choose sprite. So we're just going to click on the cat itself. Okay, there are other options which we'll talk a little bit about later on, but for now we're just going to click on choose a sprite, which is the cat itself. Once you click on that, it will give you all of the sprites that are available in Scratch, and there are lots. So the ones that we're interested in using for this workshop are the people ones. So we can filter the results. That means that we can cut down the amount of results that we've got by clicking on people. So that way we only have results that are people. And then you can choose which one you want to use. Now for me, I'm going to be using this Champ 99 because I find it's the most close to the dance moves that I came up with in part 1 of this workshop. But if you came up with something slightly different, there's no reason why you can't choose a different one from the options, or you can follow along with me and use the same one and then maybe change it later on. It's completely up to you what you want to do. So I'm going to be clicking on Champ 99. And that will pop him into my Scratch, and you can see he's already appeared on the stage. If he's not quite positioned correctly, all I need to do is just drag him around and I can move him to where I want to. You can see that he's appeared down here in the thumbnails where I'll have all my different sprites appearing later on. Okay, so let's go back and have a look at what we need to do next. Right, so we want to think about how can we create more moves easily. So that's what our question is going to be next. So we've added our sprite, we've added our character that's going to be doing our dancing, but how can we make more moves easily? So the way that I suggest that we do that is we actually use the movements that your particular sprite has already got added to them. So we can rename the dance costumes to make them more appropriate for what we want to do. And then we can also create some opposite costumes by flipping horizontally. So I'm going to show you those two steps now. Okay, so to access the costumes for your particular sprite, the first thing you need to do is make sure it's selected. Now you can tell it's been selected because it's gone blue. If you have more in here, you can tell the one that's selected is the one that's highlighted in blue. Then you're going to go to the tab that says costumes. So just up the top, near the Scratch logo, just underneath, there's a tab that says costumes, and it's got a little paintbrush next to it. Click on costumes. And then you'll see that all of the different costumes that are part of your particular sprite are listed there in front of you, and you can click on them and have a look through what different dance moves your particular sprite has assigned to it. But if you look, you might notice that the naming of these particular dance moves isn't all that great. So you can see that this one with the hands in the air is called Champ 99A, which doesn't mean anything at all to me. And I know that if I started to use this in my program, I wouldn't remember what that actually meant. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to delete that costume name, and I'm going to change it to something more appropriate. So I'm going to call it hands in the air. There we go. Okay, and then all I need to do is just click onto the next one and it will have renamed it. So you can see now it's called hands in the air, and I'm going to do that with all of my dance moves. So just go through each of yours as well and rename them something more appropriate. So this one I'm going to call hands down. Then I've got this one here, which I'm going to call shrug. Then I've got another one, which I'm going to call running man right. I'm also going to put number 1 because actually there's 3 parts to the running man movements in here. So then I'm going to go to the next one, which is going to be my running man right 2, as I'm sure you just guessed. So running man right 2. Then I've got this one, which I'm just going to call pose. And finally, I've got this one here, which is another running man one, really. So I'm going to call that running man right 3. Whoops, running man right 3. Okay, so I'm just going to give you a bit of time just to name all of yours, and then we'll move on. As I said before, pause it if you need to, if you need a little bit longer. Okay, so the next step in step 2, the next part of step 2, was to create some opposite costumes by flipping horizontally. So I'm going to show you how to do that now. So let's head back over into Scratch and have a look at how we do that. Okay, so you can see that we've got my running man right movements. In fact, I'm going to move this one up so it fits with the other 2. So to move anything, all you do is just click and drag it up and then let go, and it will go to where you want it. So those 3 movements, which I've got running man 1, running man 2 and running man 3, all 3 of those I could make a whole separate dance move just by flipping them on the horizontal axes. So remember, there's 2 different ways you can flip things. You can do horizontal, and you can see there's a little diagram to show you what that means, or you can flip on the vertical axis, which is here. So it's mirror imaging, okay? So it's just to do with where the mirror would be placed. So I want to do a copy of all of these. So if I just do it straight away and just click flip horizontal, that's great, but I've lost my original dance move, and that's not what I want to do. I want to create a whole separate movement. So I'm going to put him back as he was. One thing you can do if you do make any mistakes, so I flip it and I realise that's a mistake, you can click here just to undo the last step. So I'm just going to undo that. There you go. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to do a right click on the little thumbnail images of my movements. So I'm going to do a little right click, it brings up a little menu, and I'm going to go to where it says duplicate. Duplicate just means make a copy of, so we end up with 2 copies. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing with each of my running man movements. Okay, I'm just going to scroll down and get my last one. So right click and duplicate. So now I have 2 of each of the movements. Okay, so the next thing I need to do is go through and make the flipped horizontal version. So I'm going to click on my running man and I'm going to click on flip horizontal. Okay, and then you can see there's my original, there's my one that's now been flipped on the horizontal axis. Then I'm going to go to my next one, I'm going to keep him as he is, I'm going to go to the one after and I'm going to flip him on the horizontal axis, and I'm going to do the same thing, keep that one, go to the next one and flip it. Okay, so now I have my movements, I need to rename them. So the ones that are now facing to the left, I need to rename, instead of running man right, I'm going to rename them as running man left. And I'm going to use the same numbering system. So running man left 1, that's that one. And then down here I have running man left 2. And finally down here I have running man, just going to highlight it, running man left 3. There we go. Okay. The other thing you could do if you find it useful is to move the movements together. So you've got all of the right movements together like that. Whoops. And then I've got all my left movements together as well. That might be useful as well. Okay, so I'm going to give you a little bit of time just to do that with any of the moves that are appropriate to you. The other thing you could consider doing, I'm not going to do it because I don't think it will work too well for my particular dance, is you could also flip on the vertical if you wanted to make it look like your character was perhaps doing a little bit of a head spin or something like that. But for me, it doesn't really work. But if it works for your character, then feel free to add that in as well. So over to you. Okay, brilliant. So hopefully you've carried that out. You've now made it so you've got your characters in there. You've named them all appropriately, all the different movements, all the costumes for your particular dancer. You've added some flipped costumes, so you've effectively doubled the number of costumes that you've got available for your dance routine. Let's have a look at what we're going to do next. So the next thing we're going to do is we are going to drag the scratch instructions in to create the dance routine. But before we do that, I want you to have a little look at the example that I have on the screen for you. So it says, when the green flag is clicked, switch to costume, hands up, switch to costume, hands down, switch to costume, hands up, switch to costume, hands down. I want you to have a little think what you predict is going to happen when we run the code with this. So have a little think, what do I think might happen when I run the code with this? You've hopefully got your idea in your head of what you think might happen, because we're now going to start to add it into our program. So let's head back over into Scratch and we are going to add that to our program. So we are at the moment inside the costumes tab, and we're going to head over into the code tab. So next to the costume tab is the code with the little blocks you can see next to it. And this is the code tab. You can see all the different types of blocks are listed down the side with different colours. We've got motion, looks, sound, events, control, sensing, operators, variables and my blocks. Now we're going to use some of these today. We're not going to use them all. And we're going to build that first example program together now. So I'm going to go into the events blocks, and you can see they're colour coded. So the events are this sort of the lighter orange colour, and I'm going to drag in the when the green flag clicked hat. We call them hats, the ones that go on top. And then you're going to go to the looks section. That's the sort of the darker purple, and you're going to drag in the switch to costume block. Now you might notice that there's not multiple ones of these switch to costume blocks. That's because if you click on the little arrow, you can actually select the different movements that you have included in your sprite. So there is listed all the different costumes that your sprite has allocated to it. So you can select the one that you want. So I'm going to do hands in the air first, then I'm going to drag in another switch to costume. I'm going to do hands down. Then I'm going to get another switch to costume, and I'm going to pop in the hands in the air, and I'm going to do a fourth one, and I'm going to do hands down. Okay, and again I'm just going to give you a tiny bit of time just to drag those blocks in for yourself. Again, don't forget you can always pause it if you want a little bit longer. Okay, brilliant. Hopefully you haven't actually run your code yet, because what we're going to do now is I got you to predict what you thought was going to happen. So let's run my code and see what actually happens. So I'm going to press the green flag to run the code, and hopefully we should see something happen. So I'm press the green flag. Oh, that's a bit strange. Is that what you predicted? Because I'd predicted that he was going to go hands in the air, hands down, hands in the air, hands down, but he didn't. He just went straight from hands in the air to hands down. Okay, so why might that be? Let's have another look at what our code actually says. So let's go and have a closer look at what our code says. It says switch to costume, hands in the air, hands down, hands in the air, hands down. But why does that cause him to do the movements in the way that he does? So quite clearly, our idea of just putting all the movements in one long list like this clearly doesn't work. Yeah, we can't use that, so there must be something else that we need to do. So how can we make sure that we can see the moves clearly? Because actually what's happening is he's moving through the movements, it's just he's doing it so quickly, or the computer is doing it so quickly, that you can't actually see it, because our human eye can't keep up with that speed. So we need to think about how we can slow down the progression through the dance sequence. Now, if you are used to using Scratch, you can always pause it here, have a go at what you think the answer might be, and then check back and see if it matches mine. But I'm going to go straight on to explaining how to do this. So we're going to be using a block from the control section to do this, because what we're going to do is we're going to be dragging extra instructions in to create the dance routine, and we're going to start to use a wait instruction to delay the change between each of the costumes. So you can see in this example that there is a wait instruction between each of my movements. So we've got the hands up there, but then we've got a wait instruction of a 0.4 seconds between that and the next instruction. This means, actually, well, I'm not going to tell you what it means because we can add it in and then we can see what happens. But maybe you want to have a little prediction of what you think this might do. What does it mean when we add that wait instruction between? We're going to head back over and add that in now. Okay, so we're going to add in that wait instruction. You can find the wait instruction in the control section. So we were using the events earlier where we found the when green flag clicked. We're going to go to the control section now, and you're going to drag in the one that says wait 1 second. Okay, so just like before, it doesn't say exactly what we want it to say, because if you remember in my example said 0.4 seconds, because 1 second, if I put it in there, doesn't quite work. I'm going to put them all in and then we can run it and see what it looks like. So there we are, we've got 1 second between them. I'm going to press the green flag. Hopefully you made your prediction earlier about what you think might happen. Let's see if your prediction was correct. Yay! So now he's got the movements and you can distinctly see each one happening, but it's a little bit too long a delay between the movements. So the way that we can do that is just to change the number of seconds that are being weighted, and we're going to use a decimal to do this. So we're going to remove it and we're going to do 0.4, which means just under half a second. If you want to experiment with different amounts of time between your movements, because you might find that for yours, you might need to do something slightly different. So I'm going to do 0.4 in this one. And I've just realised I forgot to put an extra one at the end. Now hopefully that will work perfectly. The reason I needed an extra one at the end is because I might want it to do something else later on, and if I don't have the weight there, it would go straight to the next movement and we'd have the same problem as before. We wouldn't be able to see what the movement was. So let's press the green flag again, and there he is doing the dance moves and hands in the air, hands down, hands in the air. I'll do it one more time. Awesome, he looks amazing. I'm sure yours does too. I'll give you a little bit of time again to add the weights into yours if you haven't already. Brilliant. Okay, so we've got another question. The dance sequence, if you added all your dance moves in, would become really, really long. So how could we make the sequence more efficient? And we're going to be using stuff in the events blocks this time. So we're going to move on and we're going to start to separate the sequence into smaller procedures, and we're going to name the procedures as dance moves, and then we're going to use the broadcast hat, the broadcast block, to broadcast our different dance moves. So I will again switch back into Scratch to show you how to do this and talk you through this a little bit more. Okay, so here is my dance that I've got at the moment. So you'll remember, those of you who did the first part of this workshop, that I named this dance move, the hands in the air, hands down thing, I called that Push the Sky. So I'm going to name this Push the Sky again. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to unattach all of my moves from the when green flag clicked hat. And I'm just going to move them down here because I want to separate them, because I want to give these a separate name that I can use in the main program. But then I'm going to go into the events section like I said I would before. So that's the light orange section. And I'm going to find the section, the hat that says when I receive. At the moment it will say when I receive message 1. And I'm going to join that onto the movements that I just separated from the original part. So I'm just going to scroll down so you can see everything, because it's just moved it down for some reason. There we go. So at the moment it's called message 1, which isn't very useful. So I'm going to click on the little arrow and I'm going to click on where it says new message. And I'm going to give it the name that I said I would, which is Push the Sky. So I'm going to name my set of dance moves Push the Sky. And I'm going to click on OK. So now it says when I receive push the sky, it's going to then go through these dance moves. Okay, I think we're ready to go. Let's press the green flag. Oh, nothing's happening. Nothing's happening. So do we know why nothing's happening? Well, hopefully you might have realised that we haven't actually told it to start the instructions. So we need to have a block inside this one here where it says where the green flag is clicked that tells it to actually run these instructions. So I'm going to pop that in now. So the one that I need is the broadcast message 1 and wait block. The reason we need the and wait bit on the end is because it means it will wait till the end of those instructions before it starts to run any more instructions. Otherwise it might have got confused and start to overlap things and you wouldn't be able to see your dance routine as crisply and clearly as you'd want it to. To change which of the messages is being broadcast or which of the procedures is being broadcast, if you click on the little down arrow, you can select the procedure that you want to use. So we're going to use push the sky. So remember, we're using procedures here, just like we did when we named our dance sequences in the first part of the workshop. So the next thing we're going to do is I'm going to create a second dance sequence that I'm going to then name Running Man, because if you remember, I had the push sky and the Running Man in my dance routine. So that's what you need to do as well. So start to create a second set of dance moves. So I'm going to use my switch to costumes again, and between each of those I'm going to put, in fact I'm going to pull these in first because that save me a little bit of time. So I'm going to pull in all the switch to costumes that I want to use. I'm going to do this twice. I'm going to need 6 of these switch to costumes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And I'm also going to need from the control section the wait. Now the wait, as before, it's 1 second, but we want it to be 0.4 seconds. Now to save me a little bit of time, I'm actually going to change it in here, because if I change it in here like that, it means that when I pull it in, it will stay as 0.4 and I won't have to retype it in each time. So I'm going to put in the wait 0.4 seconds between each one. There we go, and I've got a couple more to pop in. 1, 2, I'll just drag it up in case it's disappearing down the bottom, and I'll pop one more at the end for the same reasons I did before. And I need to pop in the movements that I want to use. So I'm going to change from pose to Running Man right, and I'm going to have Running Man right 2 and Running Man right 3, and I'm going to get him to do the same thing again. So I'm going to go through the same movements again. So Running Man right 1, Running Man right 2, Running Man right 3. Now there's no reason that you couldn't reuse some of your movements that you've already used, so feel free to drag those in if you want to. There's absolutely nothing wrong with doing that. So we need to do the same thing as we did before, and we need to put the hat on the top that actually names this particular sequence of movements. So we're going to go to the events section again, and we're going to go to the when I receive block, drag that in and click on the little arrow and click on new message and give it a name. So this one is called Running Man. Oops, I'm not actually typing anything. Let's try that again. So Running Man, there we go. And then I'm going to click on OK. Okay, so now I've named this little procedure Running Man, and I can use the broadcast block again to say that I want to run that particular dance move. Okay. So now, if I press the green flag, maybe you want to do a little prediction again, what's going to happen. So a little prediction, have a think about it, what do you think is going to happen this time? So press the green flag, he does the push the sky, followed by the Running Man. Awesome, okay. The other thing that you can do at this stage, if you want to, is if you have some movements that you want to use at the beginning and the end of your dance, you can pop those in and now as well. So I'm going to do that as well. I'm going to pop in a switch to costume that goes right at the very beginning, and he's going to start the dance by doing a hands down. Okay, so he will start, oops. Okay, so that reason it started playing was because I clicked this and it automatically starts playing. So I'll show you by pressing the flag in a minute. So I'll switch that in a second. I'm going to use a wait, and I'm going to make it slightly longer. I'm going to make it 1 second and pop that in there. And I'm going to add one last switch to costume, which is going to go at the bottom, and it's going to be the pose. Okay, there we go. So I press the green flag. He's going to do his hands down for a second, then he starts doing his dance. There we go, doing the Running Man. and he ends with a pose. How awesome does that look? Okay, I'm going to give you a little bit of time. As I said before, remember, pause it if you need more time. You can make a third dance move. In fact, I would really highly recommend that you do. Have a go at doing it yourself. Create a third dance move and add that to your sequence. Okay, amazing. Hopefully you've got that in there now. So the next thing we're going to think about is that the dance sequence is performed more than once, and we need to think about how we would instruct the sequence to repeat, and could we then make the procedure instructions more efficient. So we're going to be using the control section for this, and you can see that is already highlighted here. So we're going to use the control section. So let's hop back over into Scratch and have a think about what we're going to do for that. So how can we make our instructions more efficient? Okay, so previously we have used loops, haven't we? We've used a way of repeating the instructions, and you might have noticed that there is a block just underneath the weights block called repeat, and it has a set number in it. So that might well be something that we want to use for this. Let's have a little look at what it might end up looking like. Okay, so we want to repeat the dance routine a set number of times, and we're going to use the repeats within our procedures. So you can see on this one here, we've got a repeat in here, which is just around the procedures. You see that I've also added the procedures twice, just to get something a little bit different happening in there. And I've also added in the repeats into the procedures themselves. So rather than having to put hands up, hands down, I've actually just told it to repeat it twice. So little prediction again, when I run the code, what do you think might happen? Have a little think about it. What do you think might happen this time? And then we'll move back into Scratch and look at how we add this in ourselves. Okay, so let's have a look at adding this in. So in my example, I had these two broadcasts repeated. I actually had them repeated twice, and then I had around them another repeat that told it to repeat twice again. So I'm actually going to make it a little bit more efficient than I had in my example, and I'm going to drag that in. Don't worry if things don't quite go where you want them to, because you can drag things back out. There we go. And instead of repeating 10 times, I'm going to repeat it 4 times this time. That will do actually the same thing as what my example in the program, in the PowerPoint did. And then I'm going to use the repeat again, and I'm going to add it into my procedures. But as I said, I'm going to make these more efficient. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the repeated parts of the code. So you can see that these instructions are repeated twice. They're exactly the same. And because they're the same, I can delete the part that was repeated and instead use a loop or a repeat or iteration, whichever you want to use, whichever terminology. So I want that to repeat twice. And if I look in this one, I can see that my instructions start to repeat after this point. So it does the running man 1, 2 and 3, and then it does it again. So once again, I can take off the bottom half as soon as it starts to repeat the instructions and delete that. So I just delete it by dragging it over here and let go. And I'm going to put in the repeat block, and I'm going to change the number so it's repeated twice. Okay, so this is going to do exactly the same as my example did. Hopefully you made your prediction of what you thought the example might do. And I'm going to press the green flag now and see if your prediction was correct. There we go, it's got push the sky, then the running man, then push the sky, and then the running man, and push the sky, and then the running man. It's the third time through, I think now. Push the sky, and then the running man. And then we have the pose. So hopefully you predicted that correctly, that it was going to do push the sky, it would run this bit of code twice, it would jump back up here, and then it would do the running man, it would do that bit twice, and then it would do it a second time. So it jumps down to push the sky, does that twice, jumps to running man, does that twice, then it does a third time, jumps to push the sky, does that twice, jumps to running man, does that twice, and then it does a fourth time, push the sky twice, running man twice, and finally, because it's now repeated 4 times, it actually goes to the pose costume, and that is the end. I don't know if you noticed, I also used an extra block in my example, and I'm going to pop that in now. I added 1 extra block on the end, which is stop all, and that just means that if there's any instructions that are still running, by the time it gets to this point, it will stop them. So you can pop that in as well. That's just in the control section, and it's the one that says stop all, and it's different to the other blocks because it doesn't have the little bit that sticks out that you can connect onto, because it's the end of your program. So just like in our flowchart that we used previously, it is going to show you where the end of the program is. Okay, so let's hop back over into our PowerPoint and have a look at what we're going to be thinking about next. Okay, so we have another question. How can we ask questions in Scratch, and how can we store the answer to the question, and how do we make a selection using an if statement in Scratch? So we've come across this a little bit in our examples from the last part of the workshop. We thought about having a question which you could then use to control what was happening in your dance routine. So what might that look like in Scratch? Which of these different parts of Scratch and the different types of instructions do you think we might be using? Okay, let's have a look. So we are going to use this one here, which is going to ask a question. So we're going to look at how you can ask and display a question, and we're going to then also include something called an if statement. So as before, have a little think about what you think might happen when this code is run. Have your prediction in your head ready, because we're going to head over and look at how we're going to add this into our Scratch program now. Okay, so we are going to do a question. We're going to use a question. It's going to check to see if you're ready to dance, and if you are, something's going to happen. So let's pop that in. So we're going to go into sensing, and you're going to find the block that says ask, what's your name, and wait. So obviously this is not the right question, but we can tell it's something that we can change, because just like before, it's got that little white box with some text in it that we can change. So we're going to remove that text and we're going to change it to something that's more appropriate for what we actually want to do. So in this case, we want to ask, are you ready to dance? Now you could give a little bit of guidance on how you want the answer written in, and I'm going to put in capitals Y or N for yes or no. It says ask, are you ready to dance? Yes or no, and wait. Now what we then want to do is we want to see if their answer is a particular bit of text. So we can do this by using an if statement. So we're going to go to the control section, and you're going to find the one that says if then. There are different types of if statement. There's one here below it that says if then and else. That's a little bit more complex, but we're not going to use that today. We're going to use just the if statement. So drag in the if statement, and that needs to wrap around your repeat. So it's going to fit in there, and you need to work out what bits of it you don't need inside the if statement. So the bit that's going to come out of the if is the stop at the end, and I'm going to drag that out and just pop that at the very end of the program. Now you can see that there's a little sort of, it's a hexagon just in here, which is empty. And we need to put something in here that's actually going to be the condition of starting our dance routine. So this is like what happened in our example with our flowchart, where we had the little diamond shape where the question was in. That is effectively what we're putting in now. So we're working out what the question is for our dance moves to start. So the question is going to be, it's going to need an equal sign in it, because it's going to be if something is equal to something. So we're going to go to the operators section. That's the green bit. And you're going to find the block that has the equal sign in it. So don't worry again if it has something different to what you're wanting to put in, because we can change that. So drag in the one that has the equal sign in the middle of it. And it's really helpful at Scratch. It shows you where you're going to place things. So if you accidentally put it in the wrong place, don't worry, you can pick it up again and move it. If you go to put it anywhere else, or somewhere it doesn't want to go, you can tell it where it's going to go, because it makes a little like white bit appear. So like a white highlight around the area where it's going to go. So we want this to go into the if statement. So I'm going to drop it in there. And I need to put something in each of these boxes on both sides of the condition. So you want to say if something is equal to something else. So the thing on this side, on the left-hand side, what we want to use is in the sensing section. So we're going to go back into sensing, and you're going to grab the one that says answer, because this will take whatever the person types in as a response and check to see what they've written. And if they've written yes, then it will do the dance moves. So we're going to drag in the answer and we're going to pop that in there, and we're going to change the 50 because we don't want it to be the answer to be 50 because no one's ever going to write 50 in, and we're going to change that to a capital Y. So now let's see what happens. So you had a prediction before I went on to this section, and hopefully you can remember what that was. If you can't remember, just have a little think about it now. What's your prediction? What's going to happen when we run the code? I press the green flag and it's brought up the question, but nothing's happening. He's not doing my dance moves. Why? Ah, hopefully you're shouting at the screen that I haven't typed anything in yet. So I'm going to type in a N and press enter. Nothing happens still. Oh, I can hear you shouting at my screen again that I didn't type in Y because that's what I should be doing. So I'm going to stop and run my code again. This time I'm going to type in a capital Y and press enter. And now he does his dance moves because we've used an if statement. So we've used a conditional. We've used that diamond shape that we talked about last time, the diamond shape that we used in the flowchart that says if the answer to this question is true, then run the code. So if the answer is yes, then run the dance routine. Excellent. I'm going to give you a little bit of time once again just to add that into your program if you haven't already, or maybe you might want to push it a little bit further and maybe have a separate question somewhere else. You might want to ask, do you want to repeat it, or do you want to see my next dance routine? The decision is yours. Think about how you might want to extend it. So I'll give you a little tiny bit of time. Remember, pause it if you need it, run it back if you need to check what I did, and just go back over the instructions, and it's over to you. Awesome. Right, so we are going to do a few bits just to finish off what we've got in our dance moves. So we're going to look at how we can duplicate the sprites. We're going to look at importing a background disco stage. In fact, I think it's a bit more of a rock stage than disco stage personally, but hey. And we're also going to look at how we could possibly add some music, because a dance routine without any music does look a little bit silly. So that's what we're going to do next. We're going to hop back over into Scratch and look at how we can add those things in. So let's pop that back onto there. Right, so we are going to first of all do the adding the background. So to add a background, if you look on the very far right hand corner, you might notice that there's a little bit there that's called stage. And I told you before, the stage is this area here, the white area that your sprites appear on. And at the moment, it's got a backdrop, which is the name that we actually use if you were in the theatre industry for the things that like make your stage look different. So if it was a production of something that was set in Victorian London, then you'd have the Victorian style streets and the houses and gas lamps and all that kind of thing. Or if it was a disco production, then you might have a club with a disco ball and lights and all sorts of things like that. So that's what a backdrop is. But we need to add a backdrop to our dance routine now. So we are going to go down the bottom, and you'll see it's very similar to what we did when we added our first sprite. There is a little icon that looks like a little sort of almost like two little hills, and if you click on that, it will pop out choose a background. Click on choose a backdrop, and then it will bring up lots of different options. Now, it's obviously completely up to you which one you go for, but the one I'm going to use is the concert, because I think that fits best with the theme of my work that I'm working on at the moment. So I'm going to click on concert, and that's it. It's added it. You can see it's there in the background. My sprite is now a little bit big for the stage. He looks a little bit like a giant. So I'm also going to shrink him down a little bit. To do that, you might have already noticed that there's a size variable. A variable is a name that we give in computing to something that can be changed. So it says it's 100, so we're going to make that smaller, and I'm going to go to 80 and just press enter, and that shrinks him down a little bit. And now he looks a lot better on my stage. He doesn't look quite so ridiculous. So the next thing we're going to do is we are going to duplicate the sprite. So we want to give him some backing dancers effectively. So to duplicate the sprite, I'm going to do a right click on the little thumbnail image of him, and I'm going to go to duplicate. There you go. So now I've got two versions of him, and I can drag him out from behind so they're not on top of each other. I can even move things around a little bit so that he's not doing quite the same dance move as the first person. There we go. So now I'll run it in a minute. I'm going to duplicate him again. So I'm going to do right click again, brings up that little menu, click on duplicate, and again I've got a third one, and again I'm going to drag him over here so he's not in a position that's different place to other people and not on top of each other. And I'm going to change his movement. He's going to start with the shrug. There we go. And now if I press the green flag, you can see, there we go, they all start with a slightly different movement, and they're all going to ask me if I'm ready to dance. Whoops. There we go. And there they go, doing their awesome dance. Okay. You can experiment anyway. So if you want to add more dancers in, you could perhaps use different dancers, so not the same as my first one. Add some extra ones in there. And the next thing I wanted to do was show you how to add some music, because actually I think it'd be really nice to have some music playing in the background. Now to do that, I'm just going to go to the backdrops, and I'm going to add the instructions for this onto my stage itself. So I'm going to go to the sounds, and I'm going to go to this icon here, choose a sound, and I'm going to choose a different bit of music. So have a look through, there's loads of different ones. If you click on it, it will add it in, and the one I'm going to use is, I'm going to just add it in, I want to have a loop, and the one I'm going to use is the dance, that one. Okay, and that's going to be my dance. Okay, so that's going to be the music that they dance to. And I'm going to add that in to my code. So I'm going to go back to code again, and I'm going to go into the events section. I'm going to pop in the when the green flag is clicked, and I'm going to add onto that a little bit of sound. So the blocks that you're going to need is the sound with the sort of purpley pink colour, and I'm going to drag in play sound, dance energetic until done. Or if you have a different dance move that different bit of music that you want to use, just swap between it in here. So same as before, click on the drop down menu to swap between them. Okay, so I'm just going to check that that's working. I'm going to press the green flag, and it should make them start the music. Oh, it's paused, ready for me to answer the question. And I'm just going to go back in. I'm going to strip mine back down to the original just with one dancer, because I think it worked better as it was. So I'm going to delete my extra dancers because I don't really want to use them. And I'm going to press the green flag. There we go. Okay, so there is my dancer doing his amazing dance. I've realised my music isn't quite long enough, so I probably need to put one of those little repeats in there to make it repeat long enough so that my dancer dances with some music in the background the whole time. But I know that you know how to do that, so you can work that one out yourself if you want to. So we have completed this particular workshop, and we have really done loads and loads of things in this workshop today. So let's have a look at what parts of the challenge we have achieved. So let's head over like that. Okay, so in this workshop you have learned about how to implement a pre-written algorithm in a programming language such as Scratch, and you've learned how to create a digitised version of a dance sequence using sequence selection and repetition. And you've also thought about how to improve the effectiveness of a program by implementing procedures. And you've done all of those things really fantastically. So If you wanted to take things further, maybe you wanted to use images to represent different dance character movements. They could be photographs of you or your family in the different dance positions, or you could use the pictos supplied by us at Digital Schoolhouse, or even design some artwork generated by you. I'm going to very, very quickly show you how you could do that if you wanted to use your own images rather than use the ones that are built into Scratch. So I'm just going to hop back into Scratch to very quickly show you that if you wanted to do that. Okay, so if you wanted to do that, all you do is, instead of doing the little cat for choosing a sprite, you go to the top one that says upload sprite, and then you go to wherever you've saved your particular pictures. So if I'm going to go to my pictures folder, and if I go to, it's already in date order, and I can choose one of these and add it in. There you go. So there is one of the actual Just Dance characters added as a sprite. Obviously, if you've got pictures from your camera, you could get your parent or guardian just to upload them to your computer, and then you can just add them in. So all you do is go to choose sprite, but instead of clicking on the cat, you click on the very top option, which is upload sprite, and then you can add your own pictures in and code them and use the blocks to control the movement that that particular character makes in exactly the same way as you did with my example. Okay, fantastic. So you have completed this workshop with me. You've done Just Dance with the Algorithm Part 2, and I hope that you really enjoyed it. Next time we're going to be looking at game mechanics and how they are used to control the rules and also how you win or lose a game. So if you're interested in that, join me next week on Tuesday to have a go at those and do some fun activities around game mechanics. So I hope you really enjoyed this workshop and you've had a good time in creating your code and creating your dancer with their background in Scratch. Thank you for taking part. I hope you've had fun and learned something new. If you've enjoyed this workshop, check out our YouTube channel for more follow along activities. If you've got any questions or feedback for me, please email dsh@ukie.org.uk. Now, we'd love to see you learning computing at home with Digital Schoolhouse. Parents and guardians, please feel free to share your images or videos using the hashtag computing at home on Twitter or Facebook. If you are a teacher and are interested in joining our programme, applications are currently open for new lead teachers, or maybe you're the parent of a primary age pupil and are interested in finding out about how Digital Schoolhouse can work with your child's school. You can find out more about both of those things on our website, which is digitalschoolhouse.org.uk. You can find our contact information in the section below or at the end of this video. Lastly, I wanted to say a huge well done for taking part today. I'm Estelle and I look forward to seeing you next time.